Welcome to the Ghosts of Change podcast.
If someone wanted to have a night of fun and partying in Boston today, the question of where to go would receive many answers. Although fun can be found downtown, in the North End, or at the Seaport, no clear consensus emerges for where to go. However, for most of Boston's history, that question had one answer: Scollay Square. For most of Boston's history, Scollay Square was located where Government Center is today. Situated between all of the city's downtown neighborhoods, Beacon Hill, the West End, North End, and downtown, Scollay Square was the perfect stomping grounds for Bostonians of all social constructs, genders, classes, and races to mix. Despite its evolution from a high-class intellectual area to a seedy, more red-light district area later on in its life, Scollay Square always played host to numerous establishments of restaurants, theaters, bars, bookshops, clothing stores, tattoo parlors, and many other amenities and third places. At these places, a crucial function of the community was observed: cultural mixing and matching. Boston's neighborhoods are very clearly defined. The division between Beacon Hill and the West End is very obvious, as is that between the North End and downtown. As such, these segregated neighborhoods did not provide for very much mixing. The cross-cultural influences in these neighborhoods, as a result, was very limited. Scollay Square was crucial to the city because it combined all of these neighborhoods and allowed the people from these neighborhoods to mix and share ideas when otherwise they really wouldn't have had a place to. The most famous venue in Scollay Square was the Howard Athenaeum, colloquially referred to as the Old Howard. The theater was a cultural anchor in Scollay Square. It sat 1,600 people, and from 1846 to 1961, the Old Howard hosted plays, operas, burlesque and minstrel shows, magic acts, and traveling comedy troupes. It served as a microcosm of Scollay Square itself, because the Old Howard played host to Bostonians of all ages, classes, and tastes. Bars and restaurants like the Court Street Tavern in the square also served as mixing grounds for Boston's businessmen and local Bostonians in general. Spurred by the geographical location of the square, the confluence of ideas and culture at places like the tavern reinforced a unity of place and identity for Bostonians. Businessmen working in the financial district and City Hall would drink with midshipmen working at the docks. Young waiters, waitresses, and bartenders would serve college students around the same age. The bonds formed in these third places could not have been created anywhere else, for nowhere else in the city was there such a diverse mix of people and places. Situated at the center of such a turbulent city, diversity was a given. Scollay Square presented people the opportunity to truly be themselves and let loose for a time. Often ignored in the history of Scollay Square is the intellectual presence around the square throughout its history. It was a location not only of bars, restaurants, shops, and theaters, but also of numerous workshops and bookstores. Interestingly enough, a cramped workshop in Scollay Square was the site of one of the most important inventions in the history of humanity. On June 2, 1875, Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas A. Watson first transmitted sound over wires in a fifth-floor garret at 109 Court Street in Scollay Square. This early innovation in telecommunications, made at Scollay Square, defined the course of technology for humans in the decades and centuries to come. Also forgotten is the intellectual literary community in Scollay Square. One specific street in the square, Cornhill, hosted literary giants of the time like Ralph Waldo Emerson and John Greenleaf Whittier. William Lloyd Garrison also worked on Cornhill, publishing his abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator, there. Also, the first version of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin was published on Cornhill in 1852. Uncle Tom's Cabin would become the second highest selling book of the entire 19th century, outsold only by the Bible. Nowhere else in Boston could one find such a top-tier literary scene alongside the business and entertainment offered by the square. It was a place where people could pursue their passion and feel connected with other Bostonians. After its destruction, this cultural hub was never replaced. My grandfather grew up in Boston, and in a recent conversation I had with him, I asked him what memories he had of the square. He told me stories from every phase of his childhood when he visited. As a young boy, his father, my great-grandfather, delivered Coke bottles to the different establishments in the square. My grandfather remembers going into these places, including the Old Howard Theater, and sneaking peeks at the people who were inside. While his dad delivered soda, my grandfather climbed up the fire escape of the Old Howard and peered into the dusty windows down at the stage. He said it filled him with a sense of wonder and awe looking down and seeing this massive theater, empty of people now, but knowing that it would fill up over the course of the night. As a young man in high school, my grandfather would often skip school to go to the square, something that was quite common in those days, as he reminded me. He told me about how he would sneak into shows at the Old Howard or at the casino. Back then, it didn't matter how old you were, he said. If you had money and could stick your head over the counter, they let you in. Although times have changed, people have not. Humans today still crave the same things that humans of the past also did: connection and experience. Scollay Square offered both. Often, people would go with no idea at who they would meet or what they would do, only knowing that they would come back with a tale to tell and an experience under their belt. Scollay Square was a uniquely human area. The venues combined to generate an appealing space for all Bostonians, and all Bostonians came. Like I said earlier, the amount of people and the variation between them led to a massive confluence of ideas and culture. People brought their own lives and experiences into the square in a myriad of ways, all contributing to the cultural allure of the area. The conversations had at the square from the late 1700s all the way until the 1960s contributed to Boston's culture and identity as a city. The square unified people. No matter what had happened in a day, whatever blue-collar or white-collar struggles people faced, they all went to the same place to let loose. Because of this, the city felt more like a family. After the square was destroyed, this environment was never replaced. Boston now lacks this unity and connection that spanned individual identity. The city's establishments are scattered, no longer centralized. Entertainment can be found everywhere, and as a result, its value has really been lost. If people don't come together, what is the point? This might mean that certain areas are safer, less noisy and fun than they were before, yet more contained and approachable. However, the destruction of Scollay Square reinforced the brutalist idea that community mingling and culture was unimportant and frivolous. Today, Boston bars close early. Nightlife ends before 2 a.m. and the city sleeps soundly. Yet echoes of Scollay Square's destruction can be heard all over. City officials getting one over on the public, communities around the city squabbling with each other, the CEO has lost contact with the employee. This issue has become common around America because the causes have been mirrored in cities across the country. Third places, and in turn culture, identity, and connection have been destroyed. In an era of ever-growing technological dominance, people feel more separated and polarized than ever. Perhaps the solution to everyone's isolated outrage is to break the isolation. Allow people to come together and gather how they want instead of banning their fun and keeping them apart. Places like Scollay Square have to be recognized as important and valuable, or else we will truly reach the point of no return, when people don't even want to see each other anymore, and prefer to live their lives through a screen.